Welcome to our Corel tutorial. In today's tutorial, we're going to be taking a design created in CorelDRAW and we're going to be animating elements of this design. So we're going to be animating the title, we're going to create rolling text, and we're also going to animate our images. If you have been working with CorelDRAW for some time, why not take one of your designs and turn it into a video film or a 3D animation? Many stores today have in-house display screens. So if you've already created some artwork or some advertising for a company, why not offer to go that little bit further and create an advertising film that a company can play on one of its screens in-house? When using Corel Video Studio X6, for example, you can also upload your finished film to YouTube if somebody has, for example, a dedicated YouTube channel. So first of all, let's take a look at how we put this poster together. Our advertising poster was created in CorelDRAW simply by using a background image, which we see here, two rectangles, which have a linear transparency applied to them. I've included these two triangles because I need a backdrop for putting my text on so that my text becomes more visible. And here on the left-hand side, again, I have a white rectangle that I've also applied a linear transparency to, just so that our images are a little bit more visible. And finally, we have some text objects here. And this is basically our poster that could be printed out for advertising purposes. However, when we're creating a video, we need to use different dimensions and different units of measurements. Here I started off by using centimeters, but once I create a new page, I've actually changed my units to pixels because I now need to create a backdrop image that I'm going to use as the background for my video. So our background image needs to be in pixels. Make sure also that you have the option here to change the size of the current page. And we're now going to change our page size to a typical video output size of 1280 pixels by 720. And this is going to be our video backdrop. So the first thing I'm going to do is to import the same background image I used as for my poster, which is this one here. Now, of course, the proportions are not the same as they were to start off with, so I'm just going to go into wireframe view. Let's just zoom out a little bit here. I'm just going to resize this roughly and hit P on my keyboard just to center the image. And now in wireframe view, I can actually see which area of the image I would like to have as my backdrop. So I'm just going to hold down the Control key and just slide this image up somewhat. By holding down the Control key, I'm constraining the movement to a vertical or horizontal movement. So, and if this looks roughly the way I want it, I just need to grab my crop tool and just crop out the area that I want to use. Okay. So let's go back into enhanced view. Press F4 on the keyboard, just so that we're going back into full view. And here's my image here on layer 1. So to stop this moving around, I'm just going to lock this down and create a new layer. So I'm now going to create some rectangles. And the first rectangle I'm going to create, I'm going to use the eyedropper tool to pick up a colour and just apply this. Right click here to remove the outline colour. Now going over to the toolbox and choosing my transparency tool, from the property bar I'm going to apply a linear transparency. But instead of from left to right, I want my transparency to go from top to bottom. And by moving the slider bar here, we can decide where the opacity ends and the transparency begins. So that's roughly the way I'd like to have it. Now, by hitting plus on my keyboard, I create a copy of this rectangle. So plus on the keyboard, and now using the mirroring tools, I'm just going to flip this rectangle over. And holding down the Control key once more to get a perfect vertical movement, I'm just going to slide this down to the bottom of the screen. So this is now where our text is going to appear. We can, of course, always go in and change the sizes of the rectangle here. We just need to create one more rectangle over on the left. And fill this with white. Remove the outline, just make this a little bit longer. F4 to zoom in. And again, I'm going to apply a linear transparency to this. Let's move this over a little bit. And this is more or less the backdrop for our video done. Everything else that's going to appear on this page in the video is going to be animated. So all I need to do now is to go up to File and click on Export and just export this image as either a JPEG or perhaps a PNG file for the quality. And once we have our backdrop, we can set about animating elements of our poster. I want to start by taking our title here and creating a 3D animation. And to do that, I'm going to open up Corel Motion Studio 3D, which is a fantastic program for creating animated text, animated objects, particle effects, and much, much more. I do advise you, if you've never seen Motion Studio before, do check out the tutorial videos in our Discovery Centre, which you can reach through the learning resources on any of our Corel websites. So here we are in Motion Studio 3D. Before I create the text, I just want to walk you quickly through the interface. We have here a preview screen, and at the bottom we have a timeline made up of several tracks. Now, if you're familiar with doing video editing at all, then you probably know that the timeline normally consists of video tracks, overlay tracks, music, title, voiceover, etc. But in the case of Motion Studio 3D, our timeline refers to properties of the objects we're going to create. So we have here a track for the position, orientation, scale, transparency, etc., etc. Objects have properties, and just as in CorelDRAW you can change the property of an object, so you can also in Motion Studio. And here we have the Attributes panel, and we can also apply properties here from the Easy palette. So we have object styles, we have object effects, and we'll be looking at some of these in a moment. There are tools here in the toolbar for creating your own objects, or there are many pre-animated objects to choose from that you can also edit yourself. But for today, we're going to start off by creating some 3D animated text. We start by clicking on the text tool, and in this case I'm choosing the same font that I used in my CorelDRAW project, and I'm just going to type in the name of the restaurant. And I'm going to leave it by 36 points at the moment. I can always change the size of this later on. So I'm just going to say OK. You can also, once you choose a font here, you've also got access to adding any of the symbols and glyphs included with that font. So I'm just going to say OK. Now what we have here is basically a blank canvas that we can apply animation to. We can also apply skins in the form of images, videos, colours, textures. So let's just walk through animating this text. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to change the number of frames per second. So I'm going to go up from 25 to 29 frames per second. And this is where you now need to do a little bit of maths. You have to decide how long you want your animation to run. So if I want my animation to run for 10 seconds, I'm going to need a total of 10 times 29 frames, or roughly 290 frames. So over here I'm just going to type in 290 and hit enter. And now my complete animation will last approximately 10 seconds. Now we are here at the beginning of the timeline, and the first thing I'm going to change is the position of my object. So at the first frame, I would like my object to start here at the top of the screen. I'm now going to go right through to the end of my animation and determine the end position of my object, roughly here. And whenever I change a property of an object along the timeline, a keyframe is generated. So let's just rewind and see what we have now. So we start at the top of the screen, and by the time our text reaches the end of the animation, we've arrived at the bottom of the screen. So let's continue. Let's change the scale of our object. So I'm going to rewind back to the beginning and just change the size of the object. So I want it to change size from being quite small at the beginning to quite large at the end. So again, I'm going to scroll through to the end of my animation, and now I'm going to change the size again. Something like this. So rewind, and when I play back now, we're now changing not only the position, but also the size. So it's just giving me a feeling as if this text is coming from way off in the background to the front of the screen. So let's rewind again to the beginning, and now I'm going to change the orientation. So I'm clicking on orientation, and I want to go about halfway through my timeline. So let's say somewhere about 150 here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now rotate my text. Scroll through to the end, and I'm just going to bring my text back to more or less the original position. So let's rewind again and play the whole thing back. So we've got movement, we've got change of size, and we also have a rotation. Now that we've animated our text, we can now think about dressing it up. So one of the other options that we have here, for example, is colour. And what you also notice is that once you choose something like colour, in the attributes panel, you have options for changing the colour. So I could, for example, if I rewind, start my object off being coloured, for example, red. And if I scoot through to the end of the animation, I could then have my object change colour to blue, and perhaps halfway through we could have it change to yellow. Let's rewind and see what that looks like. So starting off at red, yellow in the middle, and ending up blue. I'm just going to undo this. Because what else we can do is we can apply texture. Now we could apply an image or a video, and up here you have other options to choose from, such as transparency or bevel. So if I click on use an image, this will allow me to choose an image from one of my folders. Let's choose, for example, this flower image, and this has now been projected onto our text. So again, if we rewind, as we're going through now, the flower image has now been projected onto the text. And not only can we use an image on our text object, we could actually have a live video playing and moving across the text. So many options here. But what I want to use today is one of the textures from Material Gallery. So I'm going to click on Material Gallery, and here we have many different materials to choose from. So we have different types of metallic surfaces, plastics, glass, wood, etc. And to use this, you just have to choose a texture and drag it across to your object. Now sometimes what you see in the preview screen is not as highly rendered or as high quality as what you'll see when you finally render out your film. So I'm just going to continue through here. So again, just drag these over. But what I'm going to use today is actually this brushed gold. So I'm just going to choose the brush gold, and on rewinding now, here we have our animation. Now what we've done so far is that we've taken each of these properties and we've basically animated it by hand. But actually over in the Easy palette we also have something called Object Effects. And one of these is Object Motion. So if you don't want to animate your object by hand, you can actually go in here and choose one of these pre-animated objects. So if I drag this across, and now I rewind and play this back, I've got a pre-animated animation here. So once we're happy with our animation, all that's left to do is to export it. Now we have a couple of options here. We can export this as a video overlay. We can export it as a 3D model, which is supported by other 3D rendering programs if you have any. We could export it straight to Video Studio. In this case, Video Studio will automatically be opened, but our animation will come in as a 3D animation track. But what I want to do to keep the flexibility is just to create a video file. We can also create 3D video files. So I'm just going to create a video file. I'm going to leave this as AVI. I have other choices here. And I'm just going to call this animated text. And I'm just going to save that to the desktop. And you can see your animation being rendered here in real time. So now I've completed our animated text, we're going to leave Motion Studio 3D and we're now going to go over to Video Studio X6. Corel Video Studio X6 is a very simple to use but very powerful video editing software. Basically, there are 3 steps here: capture, edit and share. If you were bringing in films directly from a camera, you would just start off by clicking on the Capture tab and then importing your digital media or capturing from a camcorder. But today we already have everything we need for creating our film. We have our background image, which we created in CorelDRAW. We have our animated text, which we've just created in Motion Studio 3D. And we also have the various images that we used in our original CorelDRAW poster and which we're now going to animate in Video Studio. So to get started here, I'm just going to walk you quickly through the interface again. Again, we have a preview screen with the playback icons. Again, we have a timeline, but in this case, our timeline has a video track, an overlay track, a title track, a narration or voiceover track, and a music track. And here at the top we have the track manager, and using the track manager we can actually add additional overlay tracks. I'm going to start by adding 4 overlay tracks, and I'm also going to add an additional title track. So here we have our various libraries. So here we have the media library, and the media library is where we're going to collect all the clips, films, audio tracks, videos, etc. that we're intending to use in our film project. We have here above, we have 3 icons for filtering. So if I only want to see images, I can disable the music and the video icons. So now I'm just seeing image files. Or if I just want to see music tracks, again, I can disable the filters. So very simple to use. So I'm going to start off by creating a new project folder, and I'm going to call this Restaurant. And we now have an empty media library, and we're going to start by collecting the various pieces that we need for our project. So I'm going to click on the Browse button, and on the desktop I'm going to drag over the animated text file. So continuing on, I'm going into my sample files. Let's bring this down a little bit, and holding down the Control key, I'm going to select the images that we used in our project, which are these two here, plus the background image. And again, I'm just going to drag these over. So let's start by bringing down our restaurant background image just by dragging this to the timeline. So now let's bring down our animated text that we created in Motion Studio. Now, the animation we created manually was 10 seconds long, and this pre-animated motion is obviously a little bit longer. That's not a problem. I can just take my background and drag this out to make it the same length. Now, when I select a clip by clicking on it, I have the option to play back just this one selected clip, and here we see our animated text. Or if I want to play back all clips in the timeline simultaneously, I switch to project mode and then play. Now, at the moment, our animated text has a black background. So what I want to do is I want to go into the options, and under Attribute, let's just double click here, I'm going to choose Mask and Chroma Key. Now, you've probably all heard of green screen technology. This is where you replace the background with a single colour cloth, a green cloth for example, which you can then remove and have your characters basically playing against any background you choose. So by clicking on Mask and Chroma Key and clicking on Apply Overlay Options, Video Studio has automatically knocked out this black background. You can also choose the eyedropper tool and remove the colour this way. So what I want to do now is just to reposition my text and perhaps resize it. Perhaps something like this. And I'm going to go into project mode, rewind, and just play back what we have so far. So at some point we should see our text starting to spin in. And of course there will be, in a short moment, other things going on the screen. But I think I'm going to just bring this down a little bit. Something like this. Okay. So I'm now going back to the media library. I'm going to bring in the images that we used in our original CorelDRAW poster. Let's just have another quick look at our CorelDRAW design. So you can see we have 3 images here, and we have some text. I'm going to leave my CorelDRAW design open because a little later on I'm going to copy some of this text and paste it into Video Studio. So let's just bring these down, and I'm just going to sort of make everything end at the same point in time. Something like this. And now I'm just going to go back into project mode, rewind, and just have a quick look at how the images are appearing and the timing. So background, first image appears, second image appears, third image appears. Now at the moment these 3 images are appearing on top of each other. So I need to resize and reposition these. So because they're stacked on top of each other, they're quite hard to get to. But as in CorelDRAW, where you can turn off the visibility of a layer, so in Video Studio you can also turn off the visibility of tracks. And this makes it easier just to select a particular image and just resize it and reposition it. So I'm just going to put this here. Now the frame you're seeing here is the safe screen boundary. Because people have different sizes of monitors and screens or television sets, if you want to make sure that everything is going to be seen on every screen, you need to keep all of your elements within this area. But I'm going to play it a little bit unsafe today and just move it out a little bit. I'm just going to presume that who's ever going to be watching this is going to be watching it on a wider screen. So let's just adjust the size a little bit more. So let's turn on the visibility of the second track, select the track, resize, and just reposition. Now I am doing this quite quickly today because we've only got an hour for the whole video, and of course when you're doing this yourself you can spend more time tweaking it and repositioning everything, etc. And I think I'm just going to move this up a little bit. Okay, so let's go back into project mode, rewind and replay again. So the images now appear to be in the right position, but they're appearing too suddenly. So I want my images to gradually fade in. So I'm going to select my first image, and with a right click I'm going to choose Customize Motion. Customize Motion allows me to change various things that are happening to the object along the timeline. Now if you remember with Motion Studio 3D, as we moved along the timeline changing properties, keyframes were created, and a similar thing will happen in Video Studio. So I can change in this Customize Motion window, I can change position of objects, size, opacity, rotation, shadow border, etc, etc. But for now I'm just going to start off with 0% opacity, so it's now more or less transparent. I'm going to move along a little way, increase the transparency to 50%, move along another little way and increase the transparency to 100%. Let's just rewind and play that back. So my image is now fading in nicely. I didn't want to wait until the very end for 100% opacity, otherwise we wouldn't see our image until we got to the end of the film. So I've got to 100% opacity here. So I'm just going to say OK. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on these other two tracks and do exactly the same thing. Click on the track, right click, Customize Motion, start off with 100% transparent, move along a little way, go up to about 50%, go up a little bit further, 100%, and you can see that as I've actually changed properties, I've created keyframes. And the last image, Customize Motion, transparent, semi-transparent, 100% image. So I'd now like to add some music. There are several ways of doing this. We can click on Browse, and if we have any audio files we wish to use, we can just drag them into our media library. We could also click on the Record and Capture option, and here you have the option of scouring for an audio track on your computer or on hard drive, or you can import from an audio CD. And finally we have the option of adding auto music. Auto music allows you to add music tracks which will then loop through to the end of your film. If you choose your own audio clip or music track, there's a good chance that the track will either be longer or shorter than your actual video. But if you use Smart Sound, you can add a track that will fit perfectly with the length of your recording. The first thing to do is to rewind back to the beginning, because when we add our auto music, it will be added at the point of the scrubber here. So we have various albums, and one that I'm going to choose for this restaurant project is called Global Vibes. So let's just play that back and listen to what it sounds like. Another advantage of using smart sound music is that you can actually go in and set the mood. By clicking on Set Mood, you'll see a list of the various instruments here, and you can actually tweak these. You've also got some different moods to choose from. So I could use, for example, Bash Trash, and you can see the sliders have changed, and let's just play that back. So it's much more heavy on the percussion. Oh, there are also some different variations here to choose from. And I think I'm going to choose Junku. And once we're happy with the music, we can just click Add to the timeline. And as you can see here, our music is now the same length as our video film. And just to round it off, I'm going to click on Fade In and Fade Out. So let's click on Project Mode, Rewind, and let's play back what we have so far. So it's now time to add some text. So I'm going to go back to my CorelDRAW file, and having selected the text here, I'm just going to copy that with Control-C. Now back in Video Studio, I'm going to click on the title tool, double click, and I can see already that this is going to be way too big. So let's just drop down to a smaller size. Let's try 20. I'm just going to paste in my text, just to get an idea of what the text is going to look like. So I can also see that I need some wider line spacing here. So over here I'm going to set the line spacing to 80, and that looks about right. So I want my text to roll in from the bottom. So here's my text tool, my text clip. And I also want the clip to stay visible until the end of the movie. So I'm just going to drag this out here. So with the right click, I'm going back into Customize Motion. And this time I'm not going to be changing transparency. We're actually going to be changing the position. So at frame 1, I'm just going to move this text down till it more or less just comes into the screen from the bottom. Let's just move this along a little bit. And I'm going to go through to the end of the film, and let's leave this about here, somewhere like this. Now if I rewind and replay, we now have this movement. So you can see that the text is just rolling up nicely from the bottom of the screen. So I'm just going to click on OK. Now I could continue adding more text objects, adding more motion, but in this tutorial today there's a second project that I want to start with you, and that is creating an HTML5 file. Now when we create an HTML5 video, we can actually add hotspots. So I'm going to finish this project here, but before I show you the final film, I just want to show you how you then turn your project into a finished video file. So when you've done all your adding of clips and tweaking, click on Share, and here we have several options. You could create a DVD from your video, you could export it to a mobile device, and here you have the choice of iPod, iPhone, Sony PlayStation, mobile phone, etc. You could create a video file, and here you have a huge amount of choice. Digital video, HDV, DVD, Blu-ray, AVC HD, Windows Media Video, MPEG-4 and Ultra HD 4K, which is a super high definition format that is just developing, and also 3D. So what we're going to do now though is, or what we could also do, is to upload it to the web. And here we could upload to Vimeo, to YouTube, YouTube 3D, Facebook or Flickr. So with this one project you have many various export options: uploading to social media, exporting to mobile devices and mobile phones, creating DVDs or creating video files that can be played back on a shop display monitor, for example. So let's just have a look at the final product before we look at our next project. So to start off our second video project today, I'd like to introduce you to a third Corel product. Well, it's actually the fourth, isn't it? Corel PaintShop Pro X6. PaintShop Pro is a fantastic, easy to use but very powerful image editing software. Again, we have 3 tabbed workspaces here. On the Manage workspace, you can browse for folders and open up folders where you have images that you want to work with. You can give your images ratings, you can geotag them, add place locations, you can search for people by faces, you can upload to YouTube, Flickr or Google+, and you can also add IPTC information. The Adjust tab lets you make some very fast adjustments. You have various parameters here: brightness, shadows, highlights, white balance, local tone mapping, etc. And you have some instant effects. But the workspace we're going to be working in today is the Edit workspace. Now I want to create basically a quick layered image, bring this into Video Studio and create a film, and then we're going to turn our film into an HTML5 project where we're going to add some hotspots. So if we look down here in the organizer, I have a couple of images of New York, but in both cases the sky's pretty boring. But here I have a wonderful sunset, and what I want to do is replace this background sky here with my new sky. So to create a new layer, simply select an image and drag it over to the Layers palette. Now one thing you'll notice is that this image is obviously a lot smaller than this one, but luckily, because it's high res, I can stretch this out a little bit, and I'm going to use my pick tool for this. So I'm just going to grab this and just adjust the size of my image. And as a second step, I now want to remove this sky. So we have a tool here that is immensely popular called the Background Eraser tool. So you simply click on the Eraser tool. Let's just make this a little bit bigger. And what we're going to do is we're going to move through the background sky with our Background Eraser tool, and just make sure that you don't touch the buildings which we want to keep with the black nib. So keep the nib just in the sky area. So we're just going to move through here, just making sure we're getting everything we need to remove. I'm going to get rid of these cranes in a second because we don't need those. But you can see how fantastically easy it is to remove the background from an image. Let's just go through here. Now to remove the cranes, I'm just going to use the normal eraser tool. Again, I'm going to make this a little bit larger and just erase that. Now I have another image here that I want to bring into the mix. So I'm going to select our gorilla, drag it to the Layers palette where again it forms a separate layer, and I actually want this gorilla behind the building, so I'm just going to drag it down in the stacking order. So I'm going back to my pick tool because now I need to resize the gorilla. So let's just move him around a bit, perhaps a little bit larger, something like this. And again, I want to remove this white background. So I'm going to just turn off the visibility of the top layer, and making sure my gorilla layer is still chosen, I'm going to go back to my background eraser tool and just go through here and just knock out the background. So there we go, turn visibility back on. And now the next important step is that we save our image not as a JPEG or PNG or bitmap or any other raster format, because this is going to collapse all of the layers. What we want to do here is to keep the layers and bring those into Video Studio where they can be animated. So one last element that I've almost forgotten is our New York symbol. And that's on the top of the stack, that's fine. Go back to the pick tool, zoom out, resize, and just bring this up here. So I'm now going to save this image as the native PSP image format. So I'm going to go Save As, and we're saving it as a PSP image. And I'm just going to call this image I Love New York. I'm just going to pop that on the desktop. So this has now been completed, and we can now go back to Video Studio. So back in Video Studio X6, I added a new project folder, and using the Browse button, I dragged in the image that we just created in PaintShop Pro into the media library. What I'm going to do now is to drag this image down onto the timeline, and you can already see from the icon of my cursor that this image is actually coming in with the layers as we created them in PaintShop Pro. So at the moment it's only 2 seconds long, so I'm just going to stretch this out a bit, perhaps to 12 seconds. So these are just the image layers as we created them in PaintShop Pro, coming straight in and being divided over the timeline. Now the only thing I want to animate in this case is actually the gorilla. So I'm just going to click on the gorilla, right click and go into Customize Motion. And at the beginning I want to start with the gorilla being quite small over here in the corner. And by the time we get to the end, I just want him to be quite large. And let's just move him over a little bit. And I'm just going to say OK. And let's just play the whole project back. So now we get the effect that as if the gorilla is actually moving through New York. So that's fine. So the next thing I want to do now is just to add some music. So again, I'm going to go back to Auto Music. So I'm going to choose one of my albums, and this one's quite a dramatic album here, and I'm going to choose this variation, and rewinding the scrubber back to the beginning of the timeline, I'm just going to add the music. So this is what we have. I'm going to go into project mode and just play the whole thing back. So all we need to do now is to output our film. So I'm going to click on Share. I'm going to create a video file. And I'm going to create quite a high definition Windows Media video. So I'm just going to click on this, render this out. And in the next section, we're going to look at adding hotspots by creating an HTML5 project. So I'm now going to start a new HTML5 project. I'm going up to File, New HTML5 Project. And you can see I already started the film here. let's just drag this down. And this is the film we created a little earlier. So what I want to do now is to add some text objects. But first of all, I'm just going to open up a text file where I saved some internet links, because we're now going to create a couple of objects here that when we click on these in the finished film, these are going to take us straight through to the website. So I've got two links here, one leading to the New York tourist page and another one to a King Kong Wikipedia. So I'm just going to copy the first link and go back to Video Studio, and I'm now going to add a text object. Now I can either put the link straight in, and that's a little bit large. Let's make that a little bit smaller here. Let's try something like 22. And we can just have this appearing on the screen. Let's just move this over. And here you can see by right-clicking, I now have the option to add a link. And all I'm going to do is just to paste in the same link. But of course I want this appearing actually after the heart appears. So I'm going to have this appearing about here. And let's just take this through to the end of the video. So let's move back a little bit. And here I'm going to add another text object. Let's just go back to my text file. Let's just copy our second link. And in this case, I'm going to add King Kong info here. And let's just move that up here. And again, right click, add link. And let's just copy paste our new link in here. And all we need to do now, let's just move this up a little bit more. And all we need to do now is render this out as an HTML5 file. So I'm just going to click here and just call this I Love New York. And let's just save this to the desktop. And let's just render this out. So after rendering, we're left with a folder containing the following folders and files. So this folder can be used basically for uploading to a website. To test your film and make sure that all the links are working correctly, just open up a web browser, grab the index.html file and drag this to the browser window. So I'm just going into full screen mode. And watch what happens now when we click on the title objects as they appear in the film. So this takes us straight through to the Travel and Tourism page of the state of New York. And let's continue playing. And this will take us through to the King Kong Wikipedia page. So I hope you've enjoyed our tutorial today. If you haven't yet used any of Corel's digital media, please visit Corel.com and just download a trial version of Motion Studio 3D, Video Studio X6 and PaintShop Pro X6, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun experimenting and creating your own films. Thank you very much for attending our session today, and hope to see you soon.